I had every right to have these documents, personal belongings and boxes. Really was. I had every right to have these documents, true or false?
I will be a travel influencer. Hey, I thought you were on vacation. It's too expensive. Use Priceline. They've got deals no one else has. What about work? I got you. Looking great, you guys. Do you happy time?
Oi, what's the story?
I'm just see if I can close the door for me.
Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum. Tonight we'll be commemorating the Shahadat of Hz Muslim AS. We'll begin tonight's program with Surah Yasin by Sadiq Premji. Sadiq? You can go ahead and start, Sadiq.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ياسين والقرآن الحكيم إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون وسواء عليهم أنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم إن نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين واضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاءها المرسلون إذ أرسلنا إليهم اثنين فكذبوهما فعززنا بثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب أليم قالوا طائركم معكم أئن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون أتخذ من دونه آلهة إن يردنا الرحمن بضر لا تغني عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون إني إذا لفي ضلال مبين إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون قيل ادخلوا الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين وما أنزلنا على قومه من بعده من جند من السماء وما كنا منزلين إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم خامدون يا حسرة على العباد ما يأتيهم من رسول إلا كانوا به يستهزئون ألم يروا كم أخلقنا قبلهم من القرون أنهم إليهم لا يرجعون وإن كل لمع جميع لدينا مهدرون وآية لهم الأرض الميتة أحييناها وأخرجنا منها خبا فمنه يأكلون وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وعناب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمره وما عملت أيديهم أفلا يشكرون سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون وآية لهم الليل نسخ منه النهار فإذا هم مظلمون والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالأرجون القديم لا شمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون وآية لهم أنا حملنا ذريتهم في الفلك المشحون وخلقنا لهم من مثله ما يركبون وإن نشاء نغرقهم فلا صريخ لهم ولا هم ينقذون إلا رحمة منا ومتاعا إلى حين وإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون وما تعطيهم من آية من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين وإذا قيل لهم أنفقوا مما رزقكم الله قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا أنطعم من لو يشاء الله وطعمه إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين ما ينظرون إلا صيحة واحدة تأخذهم وهم يخصمون فلا يستطيعون توصية ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون ونفخ في السور فإذا هم من الأجداث إلى ربهم ينسلون قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مرقدنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميع لدينا محضرون فاليوم لا تظلم نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون هم وأزواجهم في الظلال على الأرائك متكئون لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون سلام قولا من رب رحيم وامتاز اليوم أيها المجرمون ألم أعهد إليكم يا بني آدم ألا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن اعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم ولقد أضل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلم تكونوا تعقلون هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون اصلوها اليوم بما كنتم تكفرون اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون ولو نشاء لطمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فأنى يبصرون ولو نشاء لمسخناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون ومن نؤمره ننخس في الخلق أفلا يعقلون وما علمناه الشعر وما ينبغي له إن هو إلا ذكر وقرآن مبين لينذر من كان حيا ويحق القول على الكافرين أولم يروا أنا خلقنا لهم مما عملت أيدينا أنعاما فهم لها مالكون وذللناها لهم فمنها ركوبهم ومنها يأكلون ولهم فيها منافع ومشارب أفلا يشكرون واتخذوا من دون الله آلهة لعلهم ينصرون لا يستطيعون نصرهم وهم لهم جند مهدرون فلا يحزنك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون أولم يرى الإنسان أنا خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقا قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم قل يحييها الذي أنشأها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم بلى وهو خلاق العليم إنما أمره إذ أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون صلوات.
مبارك الفاتحة. John, Bismillah.
Durud bar Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Can you hear me?
Yes, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
मुस्लिम का खून हाय मुसलमान बहाते हैं मुस्लिम का खून हाय मुसलमान बहाते हैं ज़हरा वो मुस्तफ़ा वो अली को रुलाते हैं मुस्लिम का खून मुसलमान बहाते हैं मुश्किल कुशा हो जिसका चर्चा उसको अहले शान जुर्म आए तो सलासल पहनाते हैं मुस्लिम का खून हाय मुसलमान बहाते हैं हर्रा रहा है खबर में लाशा अखील का हर्रा रहा है खबर में लाशा अखील का मुस्लिम आँख पर से जमी पर गिराते हैं मुस्लिम का खून मुसलमान बहाते हैं बच्चों का गिरिया देख नहीं सकते शाहिदी बच्चों का गिरिया देख नहीं सकते शाहिदी हैं वो तो शाह भी आंसू बहाते हैं मुस्लिम का खून हाय मुसलमान बहाते हैं मुस्लिम की बेटी कहती है हुसैन से मुस्लिम की बेटी कहती है रोकर हुसैन से मुजान बाबा बहुत याद आते हैं, मुस्लिम का खून मुसलमान बहाते हैं। बच्चों का गिरिया देख आंसू बहाते हैं। शह सर है यतीम के, शह सर पे हाथ फेर यतीम के कहलाते हैं, मनाते हैं लोग, पहनाते हैं मुस्लिम का खून मुसलमान बहाते हैं। ज़हरा वो मुस्तफा वो अली को रुलाते हैं। सदक़ल्लाहुल अज़ीम। फातिहा।
Ahsant.
Allah sallam. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. فوض أمري إلى الله إن الله بصير بالعباد. ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل ونعم المولى ونعم النصير. والصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على الرسول المسدد المصطفى الأمجد المحمود الأحمد الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرض بأبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أهل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. اللهم صل على محمد. وقل رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد، قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتاب الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل لا أسألكم عليه أجرا إلا المودة في القربى. صدق الله العلي العظيم. زين مجالسكم بالصلوات على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد. My respected elders, brothers and sisters in Iman here in Florida, across the globe, wherever you're hearing my voice, Salamun alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Question: how can one be an ambassador of the Imam? At the first level, what is an ambassador? One of the things that we come forward in our world, whether it's a locality, whether it is a group or a community, whether it is even a family, and indeed at the highest level, whenever it is even a nation, you will find that oftentimes a representative is sent on behalf of a group of individuals. And often this representative is an ambassador, or known as an ambassador. Nations can have ambassadors, cities can have ambassadors, families and congregations and communities can have ambassadors. These individuals who act as representatives of the whole, they act as representatives of the group. And oftentimes, what is clear with respect to an ambassador is that the ambassador must reflect the views of the community, the congregation, the nation that they represent. If an ambassador from the United States goes towards a foreign nation, they must reflect the views and interests of the United States, the country they're representing. The same would be hold true for a country such as China's representative. They would hold the views of China, as well as a representative for a country like Russia would reflect the Russian views, and so on and so forth. That means that whatever that individual who is the ambassador does and is supposed to be a reflection of those individuals who he or she is representing. Therefore, there must be alignment between the two individuals, number one. Number two, why is an ambassador needed? An ambassador is often needed because it is not necessarily practical and possible for an entire congregation, an entire community, an entire nation to be everywhere at once. For example, would it be possible for all Americans, for example, to be at the negotiating table at once for the issue of, for example, foreign policy issues or other issues? This is something that's not feasible. Perhaps maybe it would be better if that was the case. But nonetheless, this one individual or two individuals or a delegation of individuals at the most is often what represents nations and communities and organizations. But the key point to take away is that there must be an alignment in terms of the ambassador and the nation. That is, the ambassador cannot be saying one thing and the nation represents something else, and they are not on the same page. This is not what ambassadorship is about. Therefore, when we come to commemorating this individual tonight, that is Muslim ibn Aqil, the ambassador of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, what lessons can we learn from the life of Muslim ibn Aqil that we can implement in our own lives? That is, when we see this individual who is known as Safir of Imam al-Hussein, that is the ambassador of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, what lessons do we learn from his life that we can actually absorb into our own lives? That is, if this is what a representative of the Imam is supposed to be like, then he should be a role model for me. Because perhaps I cannot reach the level of the Imam, but I should at least aspire to the level of the ambassador of the Imam. You know, when it comes to people, for example, even in this world, in this age, in this era, calling themselves the ambassador of the Imam, one needs to be very careful. The likes of the ambassador is that individual who is, for example, Muslim ibn Aqil. Therefore, in the brief moments that we have together tonight, inshallah, number one, I want to look at who was Muslim ibn Aqil? That is, what was his family, what were his relations, and what was his background, and what insight does that give us about Muslim ibn Aqil? Number one. Number two, why was he sent as the ambassador of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam? In particular, why was he sent towards Kufa? Did Imam al-Hussein not know the situation of Kufa? Did his brother Imam Hassan not deal with the people of Kufa? Did his father Imam al-Hussein not deal with the people of Kufa? Were his family not aware of the circumstances of that city? If they were, then why did they actually send? Why did Imam al-Hussein send Muslim ibn Aqil as the ambassador there? At the third level, when he got there, when Muslim ibn Aqil got to the city of Kufa, what happened in that environment? What happened in that state? What happened in that locality? In the beginning, who was he staying with? And then who did he move to? And then eventually what happened? And how did the circumstance and the air turn around in the city of Kufa during the time where Muslim was there? And finally, the final thing that we'll look at is what were the final moments of the life of Muslim ibn Aqil? And why is it that the scholars often say that Muslim, although he was not physically there, is the first martyr of the tragedy of Karbala? This is our agenda for tonight. Wherever you are, here in Florida or across the globe, from the bottom of your heart, send a salawat on Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Salam. The first level, when we come to Muslim ibn Aqil is of course from the family of Abu Talib, from the family of Imam Ali alayhi salam. Muslim is the son of Aqil, the brother of Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen. And the narrations say that, as you know, Aqil was an expert in genealogy. That is, he knew the shajara, as it is known. He knows the family trees. In fact, you will remember when Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen wanted to marry again after the martyrdom of Fatima al-Zahra, he came to his brother Aqil and he said, Aqil, find for me a suitable spouse that will give me a son that will be courageous, that will help my son Hussein on the plains of Karbala. And therefore he brought the likes of Fatima bint al-Hizam al-Kilabiyya, known as Baneen. He said this is the most courageous of tribes. Now question, did Imam Ali not know genealogy like his brother Aqil? Of course he knew. He's the imam of the time. But he's giving you and I a lesson that when it comes to marriages and when it comes to matchmaking, this is something that you should try to find someone who is an intermediary who can help facilitate this marriage. Now, that individual and those individuals should be trustworthy individuals. There should be people who, for example, are reliable, and there are many other things that one would desire. But to seek an intermediary is something that even the imam sought an intermediary, number one. Number two, Aqil was such an expert in genealogy that he knew all of the dynamics of the equation. I'll give you an example. We're told that Muawiyah was there at one time and Aqil was there, and there were many other people in a gathering. Now, Muawiyah, as you know, was not taking religion seriously. As his son made it very clear, Yazid would make fun of the Quran. He would make fun of Islam. He would say poetry, for example, Laibat Hashim bil mulk fala khabaran wala ja'a nazal. This Banu Hashim, they just played with the dominion. They just played with the kingdom. There was no wahi, there was no revelation. He said this openly. Now, his father may have not been so open, but his demeanor and his actions and what he was doing was showing that Islam was not really a priority for him. So he's sitting there once in a gathering, and Aqil is there, and he knows that Aqil is an expert. So Muawiyah jokingly, he says to him, he says, "Oh, Aqil, you know family trees, you know genealogy, you know the lines." He says, "Tell me, what is the line of this one?" He pointed to As ibn Wa'il. As ibn Wa'il is the one who was taunting Rasulullah and calling him Abtar. Although other people used to call him Abtar too. But when he said it, when As ibn Wa'il, the father of Amr ibn As from Karbala, the wretched one, his father, As ibn Wa'il, this individual is why Surah Kawthar was revealed, one of the reasons, when he taunted Rasulullah and called him Abtar. This same As ibn Wa'il is sitting there in the vicinity, and he says, Muawiyah says, "Tell me his family tree." Aqil says, "Do you really want to know, or are you just asking out of fun and you just want to waste my time?" He said, No, I really want to know. I'm serious. He said, "Well, the reality of the matter is there were 6 people who were claimed to be the father of As ibn Wa'il. Nobody knows who the real one was. So they did a fa'al. You know what fa'al is? They would write names on pieces of paper and they would draw them. One of the name that came out was this individual's father. His name, that individual, we don't know if that's really his father or not. It was just one of those 6. This is how we now call him this name. And at that point in time, he may have hung his head or he may not have hung his head. But this is what Aqil used to do. He said, "If you seriously want to know, I will tell you all of the facts." This same Aqil, his son is Muslim. This person who was honest, trustworthy, and the ambassador, the Imam. Muslim ibn Aqil was one of those individuals who, according to narration, is amongst the Babul Hawaij. The narrations say there are 4 Babul Hawaij, the gateways to your hajat. Who are they? Number 1, Imam al-Kadhim alayhi salam, as you know, is known as Babul Hawaij, the gateway to one's du'as and intercession. In fact, until recent times, even our brothers and sisters in Ahl Sunnah accepted and believed that Imam al-Kadhim alayhi salam, his door and his gateway, to do tawassul through him, to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to the wasila of Imam al-Kadhim, was almost a guaranteed solution and remedy to your du'as and hajats. This was common amongst all Muslims. Number 1, first person. Number 2, Aliun al-Asghar, the 6-month-old of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, is known as Babul Hawaij. That if you do dua through the tawassul of Aliun al-Asghar, your dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inshallah will be accepted. The 3rd individual is known as Abul Fadl al-Abbas ibn Amir al-Mu'mineen, known as Babul Hawaij, the gateway to one's needs and desires. And the 4th, often we don't mention as much, but the people of Iraq are very keen on this, that when even their dua is not accepted through the gate of Abul Fadl al-Abbas, they go to Muslim ibn Aqil and they say, "Oh Safir of Aba Abdullah, with your connection to Abdullah al-Hussein, have my dua sent towards the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala." That means that this individual has reached such a position that through his sainthood, through his high position, du'as to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can be accepted. The question oftentimes people ask is, how is it that you can go and ask someone else? The question is not that we ask that person for dua. The dua is to Allah. The question remains, when we tell the Muslim community, can you ask another believer to do dua for you? You have exams coming up, you have a test coming up, you have a business problem, you have a life problem, you have a health problem. Another Muslim and say, "I'm having a tough time. Can you do dua for me?" All Muslims say you can do this, no problem. There's no issue. Of course, you can ask other believers. You should ask other believers to pray for you. Okay, we're here we all agree up till here. Second point. Now the question is, let's go to Rasulullah. Is Rasulullah alive or not? According to all Muslims, which was the common view amongst all Muslims, at a bare minimum, Rasulullah was hayyun fi qabrih. That is, Rasulullah was at least alive in his grave, until the Wahhabi and Salafi movement became the norm. All Muslims except Rasulullah is alive in his grave. So if Rasulullah is alive in his grave, and you can ask any normal person to do dua, you can't ask Rasulullah to do dua for you on your behalf to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Similarly, what does the Quran say about the shuhada? Does the Quran say the martyrs, are they not alive? The Quran says clearly, categorically. So simply we are asking them to do dua, the people who are alive, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now you think that they are dead because you not perceive them with your eyes. That's your flaw, that's your issue. These are all dalil and istidlal that have been there throughout times. And this was actually a point of Muslim unity. I don't have to, we'll inshallah cover that another time. Nonetheless, when it comes to Muslim ibn Aqil, why did Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam send Muslim ibn Aqil towards Kufa? This is a question that often comes up. That is, did Imam Ali, did Imam Hassan, did the family of Imam al-Hussein not know that what was going on in Kufa? Did he not know what were the circumstances in Kufa and the people of Kufa and what was the environment? Of course he knew, and of course they knew. The reality is, what the ulama say, is that there were a series of letters that had come from Kufa towards Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Now, as you know, in the journey, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam in Rajab is departed from Medina. He is going on his journey towards Karbala, and he's come towards Mecca. He's in Mecca at this point. This individual, according to the narrations, now Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam is faced with a scenario. He gets all of these letters in hundreds and thousands from the people of Kufa, all saying, "Oh Yabna Rasulillah, come to Kufa, we are there to support you." Number one, the letters come. Number two, in Kufa, there were many noteworthy companions. In Kufa, there were many noteworthy, reliable, trustworthy people. There were many good people in Kufa as well. But there's a circumstance that you'll become aware of in a moment. So there's also that. But here's the main point as to why Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam had to send someone, an ambassador, to go towards Kufa, although he may have very well known what was to happen. Why? The reason was that if Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, according to the scholars, if he did not send an ambassador to Karbala to respond and to check in on all of the letters that he had received, imagine he didn't go, and imagine he didn't send the ambassador. What would the narrative be? People would say that Hussein went to commit that word that some people still use, that Hussein just went to kill himself, God forbid. Because he had the support of the people of Kufa, and he could have taken their letters seriously, and he could have built an army from the people of Kufa, and he could have fought Yazid, and he could have maybe won, maybe. That's what people would say. History would say, lost the battle, and it was not a massacre. Hussein lost the battle because he was short-sighted. He didn't listen to the people of Kufa. It was to respond to the letters so that what happened in history, so that people could say that nobody had an excuse now that said, oh, Imam al-Hussein had the support of those people. He made it clear at that point in time. And by the way, all of Kufa was not one. There was different views. There were still people who were supporting, and there were still people who ended up supporting Imam al-Hussein from Kufa, as you know. Habib ibn Mazah, who were from Kufa. That is not an accurate analysis of history. So what happened? Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam says to Muslim, I'm dispatching you to go towards Kufa as my ambassador and take on these letters and speak to the people of Kufa. So what happens? Muslim ibn Aqil, he gets to Kufa. When he gets to Kufa, the governor of Kufa at the time is Nu'man ibn Bashir. Nu'man ibn Bashir, according to the narrations, is the father-in-law of Mukhtar ibn Abi Ubaidah al-Thaqafi. So he's the ruler of Kufa. Now, at that point in time, when he's the ruler of Kufa, the narrations say when a Muslim comes to Kufa at first, he has a lot of support. In fact, he leads Salah in Masjid Kufa, and there are many people supporting him and behind him. But slowly things begin to change. How do they begin to change? When Muslim first comes to Kufa, the narrations say he actually stays in the house of Mukhtar himself, Mukhtar ibn Abi Ubaid al-Thaqafi. This gives us a principle. You know, after Karbala, some people said, was Mukhtar good, was Mukhtar bad, was Mukhtar this, was Mukhtar that. One indication of Mukhtar being on the right path is that the ambassador of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam is staying at the house of Mukhtar before the tragedy of Karbala. That gives an indication that the Imams were accepting of the position of Mukhtar, number one. Otherwise, the ambassador would not stay there, number one. So what happened? Eventually, when this news reached the ear of Muawiyah, who was a master politician, Muawiyah's in Sham. This is happening in Kufa. Muawiyah's in his court. When Muawiyah's in his court, he had an advisor. Muawiyah's advisor's name was Sir John. Sir John was someone who was a very cunning strategist. And he came forward and Muawiyah said, this is the circumstance. That Muslim, I have heard, received news that Muslim, as you know, Muawiyah was an expert and he had spies and all of these things. He said, look, I have heard that Muslim has come towards Kufa, the ambassador of Hussein. And in this circumstance, what do you advise that I do? Sir John thinks about it for a moment. He says, this individual who is the governor of Kufa right now, Nu'man, he is not the right governor for this time. So what do you mean? He said he's a soft governor. He's a loving one. He's a caring one. He's not the person that you need for this job that needs to be done right now. So what do you mean? He said, for what you need to do, you need a butcher. I said, a butcher? He said, yes. He said, I know one. He said, who? His name is Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad. He said, that's the only person who can do this. He said, what do you suggest? He says, I suggest that you dispatch Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad right now to go towards Kufa and to besiege Kufa, take over Kufa and take over the Dar al-Amara and remove Nu'man ibn Bashir and then put himself in power and position. Muawiyah said, very well. He dispatched it and he sent the order. Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad got the order to go towards Kufa. When he gets the order to go towards Kufa, he says, how can I go? He goes in an environment, in a circumstance where he covers himself and he masks his face. You know, in the desert, it was common amongst the Arabs that they would, for example, cover their entire face so that when they were going in the horses, the sand would not destroy their face. It would not scrape their face, so to speak. So they would cover everything except the eyes. And so he covers his whole entire face and then he comes with his entourage and he comes with the people and he comes to the city of Kufa. Now the narrations say when he comes with his pomp and glory to the city of Kufa, the people of Kufa think this is Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. When he comes with all of this entourage and all of these people, he comes and he goes straight to the Dar al-Imara and he goes there in front of all of the people and he gets to that position of power. And he removes his mask, he removes his veil, he removes the covering on his face. The people are astonished. It's Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad. He removes the Nu'man ibn Bashir and he takes over the position and he says, I am now the governor of Kufa, a butcher. This person was ruthless, ruth-hearted. You know, in certain fields, sometimes in armies and militaries and defenses, the more heartless, not all the time, but the more heartless you can be sometimes, the higher up you can go, especially in the middle ranks. So this was going on at the time. Similarly, at that point in time, he's at this helm of leadership now in Kufa. Now at that time, the narrations say Muslim shifts from the house of Mukhtar because, as you know, Nu'man has been put to the side and he's been kind of taken over. And of course, the family and Mukhtar, all of those people are now marginalized. Now, Muslim shifts to the house of Hani ibn Urwa. You know, in the ziyarat we say, Hani ibn Urwa, wa Habib ibn Madahir. So he shifts to the house of Hani ibn Urwa. Now, in Hani ibn Urwa's house, the close Shia are gathering, and Muslim ibn Aqil is there, Hani ibn Urwa is there, and the close comrades are there, and they are strategizing and planning. In this circumstance, Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad had spies. When Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad had spies, he had these spies dispatched into the house of Hani ibn Urwa. They would ask and they would find out about what's going on in the house. When they found out all of these things, they would report it back to Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad. When they would report it back to Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad, Ubaidullah said, now is the time. And he said, sent for the order to capture Hani ibn Urwa. He sent and he had Hani ibn Urwa captured. When he had Hani ibn Urwa captured, at that point in time, they actually beat Hani ibn Urwa to the point that he was bleeding. But Hani ibn Urwa was from a renowned and noteworthy tribe. When his tribesmen heard that he has been captured and this has happened, they besieged the palace of the governor. They besieged the governor's palace. And at that point in time, they were saying to Muslim ibn Aqil, they say in circumstances, either at Hani ibn Urwa's house, Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad came, and behind the curtain was Muslim ibn Aqil, and Hani said, when I say a signal, you jump out from behind the curtain and you kill Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad by himself. So he's saying the statement, the code word, the code word, the code word every single time, and nothing happens. Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad gets up and goes, and at that point in time, Hani speaks to Muslim. He says, Muslim, you had a golden opportunity to finish him off. He says, I am the ambassador of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. I cannot use treachery to kill this man. Principle, the first principle, how do I be the ambassador of the Imam? One cannot resort to treachery. The ends and the means are both important. I cannot say that I will, for example, do something haram, do something wrong, do something that's unacceptable, and then justify it at the end and say the ends justify the means. So for example, I killed a zalim, that's acceptable, that's fine. The means, you cannot do treachery in order to kill him. First principle, as the ambassador of the Imam, my akhlaq must reflect the akhlaq of the Imam. My principles must reflect the principles of the Imam. Remember, Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen in Siffin, and a man stops and he comes to him and says, yep, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, can you please explain God to me? Can you explain Tawheed to me? It's in the heat of battle, he stops and he starts to explain. They said, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, we are in the heat of battle and you are stopping and explaining to him the usul al-din? Imam looks at them, he says, why are we fighting? If he doesn't know why we are fighting, what's the point of fighting? The question, the principle that comes forward is, do I know why I'm doing what I'm doing? That's why niyyah is so important in every aspect of what we do as Muslims. So the same thing and the same principle happened. The second thing is, when they besieged the governor's palace, the tribe of Hani said, maybe we can fight and maybe we can win, maybe we can overturn, maybe not. At that point in time, Hani ibn Urwa and Muslim are there. Muslim says, if we have this, there may be a bloodbath in the city. And we cannot besiege and we cannot ambush them in this circumstance, in that principle. And there were other things that emerged at that circumstance that he said that principle is very important. That's why to be a true Shia can be very difficult at times, because you have to take the high road. You have to do the thing that requires principle, although it may be very difficult. Remember, you and I, we are here for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're not here for me and you or anyone else. That is, every single thing that I do, does it get me closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And do I do it for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or do I do it for something else? If Muslim ibn Aqil was trying to win for his own sake, he would have killed Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad in the house of Hani ibn Urwa when he had the open chance. But the principle did not allow it. Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam Ali had said, did he not say during his life, Imam Ali said, I can beat Muawiyah at his own game, but my principles do not allow me to bend and do that which is unjust. So the same thing happened with Muslim. Eventually what happened at this point in time, the support in Kufa amongst the Shias, the people who were following Muslim, began to become less and less. This is a key principle. This is why the Quran always invites people to stand up and to rise together for justice. Why? Because there is something known as the bystander effect that psychology has studied very well today. The bystander effect says that when there is an issue, a dispute, or something going on between two individuals, the more people that are watching this scene, if that audience or crowd becomes 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 or 20 or 30, the more people that crowd around to look at the scene, the less likely any one individual is to do anything. The same thing when you're going on the highway and you see someone's car broken down. You say, somebody else will stop. I don't need to stop. I don't need to help this individual. That's called the bystander effect. The same thing happened in Kufa. When Muslim has thousands of people behind him, eventually he starts the salah. By the time he finishes the salah, there is no one behind Muslim. This is the circumstance and the environment and the musibah of Muslim ibn Aqil. The narrations say Muslim ibn Aqil, the warrant was out for his arrest. They said he is a wanted man. Anyone who stores and keeps Muslim in their house, that individual will be punished. That person will be tortured. Muslim ibn Aqil has nowhere to go. He is going around in the city with no place to go. The narrations say that he's in a circumstance where he falls onto the steps of one home in the city of Kufa. The narrations say that this was the home of a lady and her son. This lady steps out. She has gotten elderly. Her name is Tawa'a. She notices that a man who seems like a stranger a man who does not seem like from the city. This man has fallen onto her steps. She says, oh man, do you not have a place to go? Oh man, do you not have a place to go? Why are you here fallen on my steps in the city of Kufa? At that point in time, some narrations say that Muslim ibn Aqil, he said very well. He says, I will go, I will not trouble you. The narrations say he got up, but as he was getting up, he said, Ya Abul Hasan adrikni. This is what some of the people of Banu Hashim used to say. Abul Hasan referring to Amir al-Mu'mineen. They were saying, assist me. He says, at that point in time, when she heard this, she said, you said Abul Hasan in a city, in an environment where people used to curse at Imam Ali's name. She said, Abul Hasan, which Abul Hasan? She said, Amir al-Mu'mineen, my master Amir al-Mu'mineen, my Mawla Amir al-Mu'mineen. Who are you? She says, I am Muslim, son of Aqil. At that point in time, she says that you are from the family of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam Ali alayhi salam. I will give you amnesty. I will give you a place to stay. She says, come into my house. I will hide you within my house. At that point in time, Muslim comes into the house. When Muslim comes into the house, she says, stay here, hide here. Just know one thing, my son, he may not be so kind. My son, he's not home right now, but when he comes back, he may say something. He may be someone who may raise the alarm. At that point in time, she says, stay here. When this happened, at that point in time, the son comes. When the son comes home, at that point in time, he has a conversation with his mother. Eventually, he discovers and finds out that Muslim is in his house, Muslim who is wanted in the city. He gives in the news and he reports it, and the news reaches Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, he dispatches an army, a battalion to come towards the house of Tawa'a. When they come to the house of Tawa'a, the narrations say at that time, Muslim, look at the principle of the ambassador Imam al-Hussein. He says, oh lady, you have been so good to me, to make me and bring me into your home and try to give me amnesty in this environment. I cannot let that these men, they have come for me. I cannot let that they come into your house. Look at the principle. He says, I must go outside so that nothing happens to your home. We have this principle that when someone does ihsan on us, when someone helps us, we do not bring harm and burden on them. This was the principle of Muslim ibn Aqil. Even in that circumstance, he goes outside of the house. He says, oh men, if you are men, then let me fight you outside. I don't trouble these people. This is their home. Muslim comes outside, and at that point in time, he begins to fight, and they begin to fight one after the other. The narrations say that Muslim was a courageous warrior. He was finishing off enemy after enemy. At that point in time, the news reached Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. They said, send more people, send more men. We need more help. We need reinforcements. He says, I've already sent 100 men. What is it that you need more? They said that this is not an ordinary individual. This is a lion from amongst the family of Haydar al-Karrar, from amongst the family of Rasulullah. He will not be stopped like this. At that point in time, the narrations say they sent and they surrounded this individual. They surrounded Muslim ibn Aqil, and some narrations say that they actually built a trench. They dug a trench behind him, and at that point in time, they used treachery against Muslim ibn Aqil. They said, Muslim, at that point in time, throw away your sword. We will also throw away our swords. We will not do anything. We'll give you a safe passage. At that point in time, when this happened, when Muslim was circled, he did so, and they, as soon as this happened, they took Muslim and they captured him, and Muslim said, this is the first treachery. They were treacherous. They said one thing and they did another thing. In any event, they took a Muslim and they took him towards the Darul Amara. At that point in time, they took him towards the governor's palace and they took him towards a height. At that point in time, Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, he begins to say at that point in time, what is your final wish? What is it that you want? He says, I just request that I am allowed to recite 2 units of prayers to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before number 1 and number 2. I just request that you send a letter and you send a notification and you send a message to my master, my Mawla, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, to tell him, do not come to Kufa, do not come to this land. He says, as for your prayers, that is between you and your Lord. But when it comes to this issue, I will not send this letter to Hussein. You will ensure, and I will ensure that it never happens. At that point in time, there are some narrations that they said they brought water as a final gesture to Muslim. They said, you are going to be killed, but perhaps before that, you have some water. The narrations say, why was he the first Shaheed of Karbala? They say when they brought the water in front of Muslim, there was blood dripping because they had beat Muslim so much. The blood began to flow into the cup that they put in front of him. The water became mixed. It was not drinkable. They brought another bowl. He says, I want another one. This is not drinkable. The second one came, more blood spilled into it. And the third came. Eventually, Muslim said, perhaps it is not for me to drink water. At that point in time, he did not drink water. Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad gave the order, he said, to throw the body of a Muslim from the down. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, he is in Mecca, he is moving, he's changed his niyyah from Hajj towards Umrah, he is leaving from the house of God, going towards Karbala al-Mu'alla. He says to Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas, he says, Abbas, look between my two fingers. Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas looks, what does he see? He says Muslim, he sees Muslim falling towards the ground. At that point in time, Abbas says, my Mawla, let me go towards the battle, let me go towards Kufa to help Muslim. He says that this is the test of Muslim. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam gives his salams towards Muslim. Ajrukum ala Allah. The final narration, I won't take more of your time. Azadaro, riwayaton mein milta hai, jab Muslim ki खबर मिली, इमाम अल हुसैन ने एक दरखास्त की, कहा हमीदा को हमीदा, तो आज से मैं तुम्हारा बाप हूँ। रिवायतों में मिलता है कि इमाम अल हुसैन अलैहि सलाम ने 2 बालियां ली और फिर
Matam Hussein.
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Hussein, Ya Hussein. कहती थी ज़ैनब आए हुसैना, कहती थी ज़ैनब आए हुसैना, हो गई बर्बाद है ज़ैनब गर्भो बला में, कहती थी ज़ैनब आए हुसैना, हो गई बर्बाद है ज़ैनब गर्भो बला में, लैला की उम्मीद अकबर की जवानी, लैला की उम्मीद अकबर की जवानी, हो गई बर्बाद है लैला गर्भो बला में, कहती थी ज़ैनब आए हुसैना, हो गई बर्बाद है ज़ैनब गर्भो बला में, सीने पे नेज़ा अकबर को लगा था, सीने पे नेज़ा अकबर को लगा था, रोती थी माँ उसकी जवानी गर्भो बला में, कहती थी ज़ैनब आए हुसैना, हो गई बर्बाद है ज़ैनब गर्भो बला में, देखिए सितम बाबा या अली, देखिए सितम बाबा या अली, कैसी मुसीबत में ज़ैनब गर्भो बला में, कहती थी ज़ैनब आए हुसैना, हो गई बर्बाद है ज़ैनब गर्भो बला में, बीबियों के सर पर नई चादर, बीबियों के सर पर नई चादर, आओ मदद के लिए बाबा गर्भो बला में, कहती थी ज़ैनब आए हुसैना, कहती थी ज़ैनब आए हुसैना, हो गई बर्बाद है ज़ैनब गर्भो बला में, लुट गया सब घर कत्ले हुसैना लुट गए सब घर कत्ले हुसैना हो गई बर्बाद है ज़ैनब करबो बला में कहती थी ज़ैनब आए हुसैना कहती थी ज़ैनब आए हुसैना हो गई बर्बाद है ज़ैनब करबो बला में।
Surah Mubarak al-Fatiha. One quick announcement before Ziyarat. Again, just as a reminder, this Wednesday at 8 a.m., we will have Eid prayers in person, starting with Dua al-Nuzba at 8 o'clock in the morning. Ziyarat.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليكم يا أبا عبد الله السلام عليكم يا رسول الله السلام عليكم يا خديجة الكبرى السلام عليكم يا أمير المؤمنين السلام عليكم يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته السلام عليك يا مولى ابن والله السلام عليك يا غريب الغرباء السلطان ابو حسن الله علي بن موسى الرضا وشفينا وشفيع والدي في يوم الجزاء ورحمة الله وبركاته السلام عليك يا صاحب الزمان الأمان 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 السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان السلام عليك يا إمامنا إمام الإنس والجن أجل الله فرجك وسأل الله تعالى معرجك وزور الأمر ورحمة الله وبركاته اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم قل لوليك حجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرزك توأ وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم صل على محمد
محمد
Muhammad,
وآل محمد
Muhammad.